I'm Gail McNaughton, and I live in St. Thomas, where we have the famous jumbo elephant. I wrote a book called To Have a Cup of Tea with a Cat and Other Cat Tales, and I'd like to read you a story from my book. It's called Jumbo the Elephant and Thomas the Cat. Thomas lived in the Old English Church and slept on a windowsill overlooking the graveyard. He kept the sills dusted, but often left paw marks on the windows as he tried to grasp the birds that flitted in the trees and tempted him. He particularly enjoyed the filtered light and could be found pruning his hair and keeping it looking healthy and silky. At night he came home to a sunset and watched the sky light up, making it easy to bask in its array of colors. He would doze off, but kept an eye open for scurrying mice that regularly taunted him. A local neighbor, thoughtful enough to care about his well-being, brought in porridge with raisins and hot cream for breakfast, cat treats for lunch, and a gourmet meal of leftovers for dinner. Thomas appeared to have it all, but the feeling of being alone often crossed his mind. He led a solitary life, living first on the streets and under unparked cars, but he took up residence in the Old English Church when a willing caretaker opened the door a crack to see what all the meowing was about on a cold winter's day, and showed him a crack in the wall at the back where he could get in when the door was locked. The Old English Church was now his home. He became known as the church's custodian, as the caretaker had died and nobody took his place, although the church was being used more these days, and a dust here and there and a sweep became a ritual before events. A summer student was hired to greet the public in the summer. Thomas's aloneness was building up over a period of time and caused a state of depression, and he was suffering from melancholy. His fur wasn't up to snuff, and he wasn't always interested in meals. The mice didn't seem to hide and just kept a mindful eye on him. Thomas wasn't interested in sneaking a ride on No. 9 steam engine like he often did, or visiting the Elgin County Courthouse or City Hall, where he was courteously treated and always given a treat. He longed for a true pal, someone he didn't have to protect his territory from, someone to be his true friend. Adjacent to the Old English Church and overlooking the highway into St. Thomas was a statue of Jumbo, the famous circus elephant. He was the most loved elephant when he was alive. Unfortunately, he was hit by a train and died in St. Thomas, which upset everyone who lived in St. Thomas or who had ever seen Jumbo in the traveling circus. He stands larger than life as an icon, and the children come with their families to see him, even to this day. Thomas knew about Jumbo, but he was just a statue. Sometimes he curled up at one of his feet and lay in the sun. He just couldn't fathom his size and what all the excitement was about as people stopped and took pictures of Jumbo and visited the caboose next door where the tourist office was located in the summer months. It was decided by City Hall that Jumbo needed a new paint job and some repairs, so a project was initiated. When it came to putting on the primer, the painter decided to paint Jumbo bubble gum pink with a paint that was named Laugh. What a laugh it was, and everyone who saw Jumbo was alarmed or had a good chuckle. Some thought it was a prank. Some called the police station. A TV crew came by. Some people were very distressed. The police paraded in their cars past Jumbo, and lots of sightseers showed up. Thomas was again perplexed and didn't understand what all the attention was about, but curiously he crept back to see Jumbo a few hours later. The sun had gone down around midnight. What he saw made his hair stand on end. Jumbo was moving around, and he lifted all his legs and got down from the cement base. Thomas watched in total disbelief and came very close to see as much as he could. The street was bare. The lights were off and no cars passed by. Jumbo saw Thomas and inspected him with his long trunk. The next thing you knew, Thomas had been gently wrapped in his trunk and taken up to Jumbo's eye for him to see more clearly, but who was looking at whom? They both were having a good view. Jumbo liked what he saw, and Thomas didn't seem too agitated, so he put him on his back. With such a tough hide and lots of wrinkles, Thomas sank into what he thought was a comfy leather chair. His ride on Jumbo's back was much easier than he thought. He worried about the paint job, but Jumbo's pink paint was now dry. There had been some worry of rain that might wash it off, but that too passed. A smoke-colored cat sure didn't want to end up with pink patches, for he would be the laughing joke of the neighborhood, which Jumbo affectionately named Jumbleville. The two of them became inseparable over the weekend, and Thomas thought this truly was a fantasy beyond his own comprehension. By day, Jumbo was motionless and a true statue, but in the glow of the moon, Jumbo got down off his pedestal, and he and Thomas went exploring in the county of Elgin and St. Thomas. They visited Alma College, Port Stanley, where they played in the water, and traveled to Port Burwell to see the famous lighthouse and windmills. Thomas didn't feel alone any longer, and although his friend was much larger, they had developed a special bond. It was pure magic and a desperate cat's desire to find long-lasting friendship. Monday morning arrived, and the painter returned to put the final coat of paint on Jumbo, which was to be an ordinary elephant color of gray. Thomas watched and shed a tear, for his fantasy had been a part of his life, and he didn't want to lose his friendship, but somehow Jumbo was looking differently already in the new suit. Looking up at Jumbo, he saw him wink an eye at him, and he didn't know what that meant. As the day drew to a close and night was all around, Thomas once again went to see Jumbo, and he was hardly visible even in the moonlight, but then he saw something he will never forget. Jumbo had a pink glow about him, even through the gray paint. It had just taken a few moments to adjust his eyes. The painter, it turned out, was a magician and concocted a paint making Jumbo visible in his pink suit to those who believed in make-believe and fairy tales and pink elephants. Thomas was always a believer, and Jumbo would remain as Jumbo, the fantasy, in his heart forever. This meant that Thomas would never be alone ever again and have his own elephant friend forever. Jumbo was just as excited as he got very used to the friendship with Thomas and their adventures by the light of the moon. Jumbo visited the old English church where Thomas lived and peered in the window, and from that point on came to get Thomas every night to go on their safari. It was a special and lasting friendship, and they lived happily ever after. They live here in St. Thomas, and to this day, they travel at night. I'm Gail McNaughton, and I'm reading this from my book, To Have a Cup of Tea with a Cat and Other Cat Tales.